Imagine having to pay tens of thousands of dollars to the family of someone who repeatedly raped you. That's what's happening in Iowa for one teenage sex trafficking victim. 17-year-old Pieper Lewis, who killed her alleged rapist when she was 15 years old, is now being ordered to pay his family $150,000 in restitution, as well as serving 5 years probation. Iowa law requires the court to sentence offenders to pay at least that amount if they kill someone, regardless of the circumstances. A GoFundMe campaign set up by one of Lewis's former teachers is almost at $400,000. CNN's Lucy Kafanov brings us the details, and we want to warn you, some of this information is rather disturbing.
Outrage is growing in the case of an Iowa teen sentenced to 5 years probation for killing her alleged rapist, ordered to pay the man's family $150,000.
The court is cognizant that you, and quite frankly your supporters, may be frustrated, even angry with the imposition of the $150,000 in restitution to Mr. Brooks's estate.
Pieper Lewis was just 15 years old when she stabbed 37-year-old Zachary Brooks to death inside his Des Moines apartment in 2020, where she says he raped her multiple times.
I wish the events that took place on June 1st, 2020 never occurred. But to say there's only one victim to this story is absurd.
Pieper was being used for money or drugs by adults.
In her plea agreement, Lewis laid out the series of events that led to the killing, saying she was trafficked by an older man who forced her to have sex with other men for money, including Brooks. She described being assaulted repeatedly, including while being unconscious, stating, "I suddenly realized that Mr. Brooks had raped me yet again and was overcome with rage." Lewis was facing up to 20 years in prison after pleading guilty to voluntary manslaughter and willful injury. The judge deferred those sentences on Tuesday, meaning her guilty plea could be expunged if she completes 5 years probation at a residential correctional facility.
This is the second chance that you've asked for. You don't get a third. Understand that?
Yes, I do.
The next 5 years of your life will be full of rules that you will disagree with, I'm sure of it.
The judge said the restitution was mandatory under Iowa law.
This court has no discretion but to impose the $150,000 in restitution payable to Mr. Brooks's estate.
I don't think that justice was served. I think that justice would have not seen Pieper Lewis spend any time behind bars.
Rights advocates point to numerous examples of victims of sexual abuse and trafficking facing punishment rather than protection.
Women of color who've experienced sexual violence, domestic violence, trafficking, any kind of harm, who act in self-defense against the people who harmed them, have not been treated well by our legal system historically.
That means I'm gonna die here.
Sarah Cruzan was sentenced to life without parole as a teenager for killing a man who sexually abused and trafficked her in 1994, pardoned by California's governor this July.
State of Wisconsin versus Crystal Kaiser.
In Wisconsin, Crystal Kaiser is facing a life sentence for killing the man she said forced her into trafficking when she was just 16. In Tennessee, Centoya Brown was sentenced to life in prison for killing a man she claims paid to rape her when she was a 16-year-old trafficking victim. She was eventually granted clemency and released in 2019 after 15 years behind bars.
You know, it's just a story that has unfortunately become all too familiar.
Reacting to Lewis's sentence in an interview with PBS NewsHour.
She was a victim in this situation. Not only is she going to have to serve time in a facility, but over the next 5 years, anything that she does can trigger her having to serve a 20-year sentence. So she's not truly free. And then there's the fact that she was ordered to...
And here's the thing, Jake. Pieper Lewis avoids prison for now, but this is a victim of severe abuse. And like so many of the vulnerable teenagers in her situation, she needs support in healing her trauma and not punitive measures. Rights activists that I spoke to say the justice system should be punishing child sex traffickers rather than their victims. Jake?
Lucy Kafanov, thanks so much. Coming up.